We're here at the Outdoor Farm Show with Pat Lynch at the Tillage demonstration. Always a very popular demonstration here at the show. Pat, this year you're doing something a little different with tillage, cover crops. Tell us what your objectives are and how the day's planned.
Okay. Part of everything that's behind this is to get more farmers to plant red clover into winter wheat. You know, we could have 800,000, 1 million acres of winter wheat. We should have that many acres of red clover. One of the problems with red clover is the tillage afterwards. So some farmers don't like to moldboard plow the red clover, and then if they moldboard plow red clover, then there's extra passes in the spring. So what we're demonstrating here today is some of the conservation tillage, the newer models of conservation tillage that will handle red clover so that the farmers can work down the red clover, get all the benefits of it, and still not have the soil, you know, erode. And so it's two things. We want farmers to plant red clover, but we don't want them to moldboard plow and lose some of the benefits. So this tillage demonstration shows how you can handle the red clover without going back to the moldboard plow.
Now, Pat, tremendous growth in cover crops in recent years.
Absolutely.
Talk about, I guess, the challenge and what farmers should be thinking about when it comes to tillage and cover crops.
Okay, and you have to understand part of the rationale of cover crops, and we are getting farmers to understand that you don't want to leave the soil bare anytime. We can harvest free sun as long as we've got something growing. If we're harvesting free sun, that puts something back into the soil. So this is where cover crops are really making inroads. When we had the older rotation of small farms, livestock, rotate around, putting residue back into the land is not as big as it is now. But now that we have, you know, more corn, beans, and wheat, and especially now that we have more soybeans. Soybeans, you know, we had 3 million acres this year. Total corn, bean, and wheat is half of our total acres. Or the soybeans represent half that acre. Soybeans add nothing to it. That means we've got to do more when we're in corn and winter wheat. So when we're in corn, we'll leave the corn stalks. Now this leaves us winter wheat. So with winter wheat, we need to put that red clover in. But if for some reason a grower doesn't want to do red clover, now they can plant a cover crop afterwards. We, as an aside, we are encouraging this year farmers to plant a cover crop, seed a cover crop right now just before the leaves fall off into the soybean crop so they'll have something to protect the soil over winter. We have to be concerned every time soil leaves the farm. We want 30% residue cover. If we have 30% residue cover, we're going to keep the soil on the farm. Fairly simple.
Talk about some of the challenges in actually getting good tillage in the cover crops. What do you need to be mindful of, Pat? Doing it right.
Okay, so as you saw these pieces of equipment today, they're expensive. And unless you have a large acreage, you can't afford to buy them. But there are lots of companies willing to rent them. So one of the issues with cover crop and handling it and conservation tillage, how do I work it? Well, we have all kinds of time this fall to allow growers to rent conservation tillage to handle the cover crops. And tillage and conservation, or tillage and cover crops is definitely, you know, an issue. And I think we're resolving or at least addressing that issue by demonstrating the conservation tillage. You know, I can't say enough good things about cover crops. One thing that I did miss was that we know and we can prove and we can demonstrate that cover crops prevent weeds from setting seed. We are constantly being challenged by weed control. But if we can do anything to, number one, reduce the seed bank, and number two, not let it build up, this is a terrible plus forward. And when you plant a cover crop, some of those weed seeds will germinate and they die. So now we're reducing the seed bank just by planting the cover crop.
Hey, final question for you. Tell us, how about some tips? How do we evaluate this tillage equipment? How do we evaluate that bed behind the implement? What are we looking for to make the right choice on the machine?
Okay, tillage is an art, and just like all other arts, it varies. It depends on the artist and it depends on the audience. So if you gave a guitar to 3 different people, one guy's going to do maybe country and western, another guy classical, and another guy maybe some type of rhythm and blues. Same piece of equipment going to a different audience and producing different results. So with conservation tillage and working cover grounds, It's the same thing. Different farmers, knowing their soil, want different things from their conservation tillage. So, you know, again, we're trying to show that today, that these pieces of equipment, they do work differently. Take a look at what it's doing and figure out what you want on your farm, what you think is going to fit best into your soil, your rotation, and your other pieces of equipment. So the secondary tillage that you have, or the planting system, it will vary on this. And what I strongly suggest growers do is, if they're getting into it, rent 2 or 3 pieces of equipment, something that's very popular in your neighborhood, that everybody likes in your neighborhood. Rent that piece of equipment and see how they go on your farm.